In Thailand, John Rambo joins a group of mercenaries to venture into war-torn Burma and rescue a group of Christian aid workers who were kidnapped by the ruthless local infantry unit. Rambo is up next on Inside Movies. Hey guys, thanks for being on Inside Movies. Today I'm joined by GMB CHOMICHUK, writer, illustrator, novelist Andrew Buckley, and cousin Dave. Thanks so much for being on the show, guys. Today we're talking Rambo, the 2008 Sylvester Stallone movie. This was part of his like comeback time, you know, when he wrote like Rocky Balboa and he did this one, and it kind of just brought him back to prominence in his like 60s after kind of taking like the first half of the 2000s mostly off. He comes back with these two movies, and let's talk about it. Like, what's the good of this movie? What did you guys like?
If you guys like the horror elements of this version of Rambo, George has got a book for you. Wait, where are you, George? You're that way.
Yes. Coming out from Source Point Press. I've got Cover of Darkness. It's like Game of Thrones meets Universal Monsters. It's about a family in medieval Romania. They get separated from each other. Oh no, right? And they encounter vampires, werewolves, creature from the Black Lagoon. We've got the Mummy, and we've got like a steampunk Atlantean Frankenstein. Kind of a reimagining of classic monsters put into like a fantasy universe. It's a lot of fun. So I encourage everyone to go out to your local comic book store and ask them to bring in Cover of Darkness. It's in Previews Magazine this November and out in stores in January.
One of the things I think we can say that I like about this movie is that on his comeback trail, Sylvester Stallone directs his own movie. It's like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do the whole thing, and we're going to get this done.
And this was the only one he directed, right? Out of all of them. I don't think he directed the last one. Yeah.
Okay. And it's a great looking movie. Hey, like I think it's, I think it's probably the best looking Rambo movie out of the five of them. Like as far as like direction and how clear and kind of big budget it feels and looks. And Stallone's like a spectacular talent. Like as far as like writing, directing, acting, voice work as King Shark. he's the man. He's the best.
Yeah, I'll definitely give it to Mr. Stallone here that he's wearing a lot of hats, and at this point in your career, it could really fall apart wearing that many hats in another country. Dealing with that many extras and that many explosions and that many action beats, and you got to give direction and be the main guy doing the action at the same time. Not an overall fan of this film, but I am definitely a fan of the accomplishment of its creation.
Yeah, he's 62. He's at this point in his career, he's dyeing his hair jet black.
I was gonna say, isn't it miraculous that he doesn't even have a single gray hair? Like, it's wild.
Yeah.
It's just greasy jet black.
Are you a little bitter there, Greg? I feel you're
maybe. Could be. But it's hard to imagine John Rambo catching cobras in one hand while also meticulously dyeing his hair jet black.
He does that late at night.
Do you think maybe
after the knife making?
Right.
Oh, that was bad.
Yeah. Do you think maybe it's like if you're bit by enough cobras, your hair just stays jet black? You think that's the subtext there?
Maybe.
No?
Maybe. Could be.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I liked his knife making scene. We didn't actually see him make a knife. He just heated up some metal and hit it till it was flat. But
do you want to know why? I read why. They did that all in one night because he really wanted to look realistic, but because they did it in one night, they didn't have time to cool the metal. So that's why you only ever see him pounding on like hot metal for the most part. And they went through like 6 pairs of heat-resistant gloves during that entire scene because they couldn't wait for the metal to cool to handle it. That's how crazy Stallone is.
Stallone.
Yeah.
Classic Stallone.
I like, catching up with John Rambo, like almost 30 years after the last movie, seeing where he is, and he's kind of, at peace in his life. he's hanging out in Thailand. Nobody's bothering him. He's just,
Yeah, I also
catching cobras and
catching cobras. I really liked that it's all these years later, and he's returned to like the source of his trauma. The Rambo movies are not that highfalutin, but Stallone, in many different interviews and instances, has talked about how careful he's been with trying to make the character and his age match what you'd actually do along the way. And, believable is the wrong word, but maybe plausible. It's plausible to believe that he would return to the sites of the Vietnam War and try to figure out his life. That part I definitely like.
I disagree. Even through all these movies, I was like, he doesn't have motivation to do half the shit he does. His motivations never make sense or are never clearly ever communicated to the audience either. I can't figure out why at the end of this movie he decides to go back home. What the hell was his decision that he's like, I'm gonna return to the farm now after all these years?
Because a pretty young American asks him in Act 1 whether or not he thinks about home. So since there's no other plot points to cling to, the only motivation there is in the plot is to then go home.
So he just needs a very subtle nudge in the direction. Then, 3 hours later, he's like, oh, you know what? I should go home now.
You know what, Andrew? You could say that John Rambo only needs a subtle nudge to go all in on almost anything. Let's say the murder of 200 people. Subtle nudge. That's all it takes. And he's all in. So a subtle nudge is all it would take to be like, maybe I should go back to America.
I do like the cast in this movie. Julie Benz as Rita. Or no, she's Rita from Dexter. I don't know who she plays in this movie, but she's
from Buffy, right? Wasn't she in Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
No, she was in Dexter.
And Dexter and Buffy, and she's
in both.
George.
She can do more than one thing, George. Come on.
Boondock Saints too.
Good. I like that. That's kind of his motivation. Is he sees this innocent person that wants to do good in the world, and so he decides to help her. And that's basically it. I like the mercenaries too, even though some of them are just total dirtbags. I like the dialogue between each other, and they're kind of busting each other's balls and stuff. And that's fun. I think it's the only time that Rambo works with any sort of team, really ever.
Right.
So I thought that was a good part of the movie. I thought the action was pretty cool throughout it, and it's a simple movie, but it's straightforward. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I think there's stuff to like in this movie.
It did highlight a lot of real issues in that part of the world. Like Stallone wanted to go for one of the major conflicts that's going on in the world today at that particular time period, and it's still kind of going on now. But it was brutal at that particular time.
I also heard it was banned by the government. Or heard, I read. Is that true? It was banned by the government because it was so critical of the current government.
Yep, and some of the taglines from the movies were actually adopted by some of the freedom fighters in Burma to use when they screamed when they went into battles and stuff. There's quite a weird backstory around it, and Stallone was super proud of that fact too, that it came as some kind of inspiration to fight against the militia.
And we can give it points for the good here too, in that all the Rambo movies, whether for good or ill, try to take stuff out of the current geopolitical situation and put John Rambo there.
That's right.
To greater effects in some movies than others, but they're at least tied by a slender thread to something real.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's that part's good. And there's so much blood. It's almost like a horror movie. It's more like a horror movie than an action movie. And you could almost argue that that's bad about this movie, but I found myself looking away so many times at how many bits the camera locked down. Like usually when someone blows up in a Rambo movie, then it's gone. The camera goes away. But there's a bunch of lockdown shots where just the meaty chunks are just raining down into the water. And it's like, yeah, okay, we're just watching this now. Okay.
I found that really that did fall kind of my bad side of the list, because it really jarred me, because previous Rambo movies, like you said, have been as kind of a certain way, a certain tone, pretty consistent. It's explosions, it's squibs.
Except
it's
for
not
one,
like,
which is arguably the only good Rambo movie. That's for another video.
But in this one, like, I remember seeing leaked footage before this movie ever came out, and it was just like 20 seconds of kind of that Act 3 shit where he's just tearing through people with a minigun, and he like cuts the dude almost in half with his machete. And I remember seeing that it was kind of grainy. Awesome. It was, but I remember watching it. It was grainy, and it was like 3 months before the movie ever came out. I was like, that can't be this movie. That's nothing like Rambo. That doesn't make any sense. And then when it came out, I was like, damn, that was exactly what they were showing. Holy fuck. They went really, really, really crazy violent with this one. Very different from previous ones.
Dave got turned upside down by your comment.
That's what happens. It was either that or the whiskey that he's drinking. Something moved him.
Oh, another casualty to the war in Burma. Dave. Just completely...
He was cut in half. That's his torso has fallen.
We shouldn't make light of it. Although, okay, so here's my question. Oh yeah, it's just three of us now. My question to the two of you. You're both writers. You both put violence in your stuff. Here's my question, and it connects to Rambo, I promise. Do you think that there is a danger when you use current events as the backdrop of your plot?
Yes.
Right, especially one like Rambo, that it will cheapen or lessen or make it into a dumb tagline or a movie trailer instead of what it really is, which is the suffering of thousands of real human beings.
I think it... Oh, go on, George.
Well, okay. So, like, one example of that is I remember watching Django Unchained and, like, really loving the movie and thinking, oh, this is great. And then, like, 2 weeks later, I watched, was it 12 Years a Slave? And it made me feel bad for liking Django Unchained, because it's like, this is like a serious, like, proper treatment of the subject matter. And the other one is a revenge fantasy. But it kind of felt like it, kind of took advantage of, like, that situation to kind of exploit it a little bit in these, like, fun ways, which it's not a fun topic, And so I think it's important to be mindful of those things that, and not that you can't tell a good movie, and I do think Django Unchained is a good movie, but you have to be definitely mindful of that too, that you're not just exploiting like the current popular or the current war or past wars or past injustices to, give your story a little bit more of a reason for happening.
Mm-hmm. And my father is friends with a few Vietnam vets who, my dad would never watch a Rambo movie, but in discussing those interactions he's had with those people, that 1,000-yard stare, that hyper alertness, and these are men in their, 70s, 80s now, who went through that. And it doesn't turn off. All of that bits that's underneath the Rambo storyline where he's talking about how you can't turn it off, you can't make it go away, you just have to try and live with it. All that stuff is based in a lived experience. And I wonder how much of that gets turned into this silly cartoon Rambo as a result. Even though I know from his own mouth, Sylvester Stallone talks with war vets a lot when he's consulting on these films. So I wonder how that all comes together. Now we got kind of high-minded here. I apologize, guys.
I think it only damages the people who were actually there, who actually experience it. I don't think it does any harm to actually, sensationalized or not, I think it does take positive steps towards educating normal people who have not been in that scenario as to some of the reality of it, while still accepting that, yeah, it's a movie. Clearly, it's not all going to be, accurate and, specific, right?
It probably did a lot more good than it did bad.
That's what I think.
It brought a lot of attention to that, conflict that people had no idea. So, yeah, is it a little exploitive? A little bit, but probably. It also did a lot of good, though, too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can say that was my first understanding. Like, that was my first exposure as a person consuming media to that conflict in a way that wasn't just a 2-second news headline that just talked about something awful, right?
I knew about it because I did writing for a nonprofit organization that has outreach into that country, and so I had a good understanding of kind of the conflict that has gone on for the last decade. And it was kind of, I mean, it's pretty accurate. A lot of the stuff that they were doing there, the way that they torture people, to the way that they make people suffer, it's pretty cut and dry as to how it really is. And it is that brutal. It is that terrible, like child soldiers and conscription and everything.
Yeah, and the unfortunate truth,
terrible.
Unfortunate truth is that movie didn't have a big enough budget for me to believe that all of those kids that looked like amputee victims, essentially, those got to be real kids in that film, right?
They did say that they encountered a lot of the real issues that were there. They were actually really scared too a lot of the time because the conflict was really raging at that particular point.
I don't think it was filmed in Miramar. I think it was filmed.
Part of it was filmed apparently.
That's crazy to go over there.
Because the chick, the blonde girl whose name I can't remember,
Julie Benz.
Julie Benz, thank you. She after the movie finished, she actually contributed a lot of time and resources to helping with the conflict there, because she'd seen it firsthand, and she was like, I can't not do anything. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, that is weird.
Well,
inside movies has suddenly become deep inside movies.
All right, guys, let's get into the bad. What did we not like about Rambo?
The stereotypical British mercenary asshole. Like, that's so fucking cut and dry.
Do you feel like targeted by this?
I felt targeted, Greg. I felt targeted, but because
see our other video about other Rambo movies where the Russian is always bad, and we'll talk about how I feel targeted.
No, Russians are always bad. That's absolutely accurate. I'm okay with that. But
at least you guys are in movies. Greeks
we shall have your head, comrade.
But he was such a dick, and I've seen that character so many times in other movies. Like, why can you do something different with it, at least? Or it just.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there's even a line which it passed through a few drafts, and then it ends up literally on the screen where the side character says, "Oh, he's just a British SAS. They all have egos like that, and they're all jerks."
Right? Like, it's terrible. I'm insulted for my countrymen. I don't even like.
Now, if you're a British SAS soldier who's watching this video and is offended, we are too. So help us.
Please comment in the comment section about how offended you are, because we would love to hear from you.
For me, I think one of the worst parts of this movie is there's no twists. It's just straightforward. Like, exactly what's going to happen from 2 minutes into this movie right through to the end. So that's a real negative. And then also, I don't think the action is that great. Like, in that, I'm not a big fan of just the big gun down with the huge machine gun on the car. It's like, that's your big action scene. Like, for me, it's more like I prefer, in my action movies, some hand-to-hand combat, a final showdown with the final boss, and and this was. It wasn't like gun fu in John Wick. This was just gun, and it just didn't do a lot for me. So not a lot of twists, and the action just wasn't really that great.
I've never loved the Rambo movies anyway. I can appreciate them for what they are, and I will always watch them, but they're not something that are high on my rewatch list. Like, I really had to dust some crap off to watch these again. And it's simply because there's just other better action movies out there, like way better action movies. I will happily rewatch other, like Die Hard or Lethal Weapon or John Wick or anything else, really. Like, Rambo's way freaking down on the list, because there is no good story arc to these movies. The action is very simple, I guess. There's nothing really complex to it. There's nothing that's brand new. It's a lot of explosions. It's a lot of shooting. There's nothing stylistically different about it. So
the only time that this movie has style in the action sequences is when Rambo has the bow.
Yes, that was cool.
It's the only time, and I think it comes down to the fact that the beats of action, how you storytell the bow, is you have to show a person with the bow. You have beat one. You've got the built-in tension of the draw. You have the target that doesn't see it coming, and then you have the strike, and then you have the guy drop, and with the gunfights, you don't see any of the cause and effect. you just see a lot of muzzle flashing, a lot of people screaming and blood flying everywhere. But with the bow, there's real storytelling, which of course builds the suspense of the scenes. And I would have loved to have seen more of that coupled with the gore that was in the gun battles. Not because I'm like, you know, a bloodthirsty maniac, but because if you're going to go through the point of having...
Well, you are Russian. I mean, come on.
You monster. It's that British ego that's getting in your way.
That's what the problem is.
Yeah. I wanted more of that in the rest of it. Because like you say, otherwise it's just a whole bunch of like splashing, blood, shell casings flicking through the air, and then people fall down. And there's really no... You know, as soon as Rambo picks up a gun, he's not going to get hit or anything.
Yeah, I think that's why this one, like, he kind of went that superhuman route in this one, where nothing could really take him down. He was above everybody, so and so. I mean, at least in Rambo 3, he got shot. Like, he was down for a while. He had to do that thing where he poured gasoline in himself and lit himself on fire and shit. There's nothing like that in this movie. It's very disappointing. The other thing I didn't like about this is there was a weird irony about having a bunch of Christian missionaries come to a war-torn country to try and stop violence, only to end up inciting a ridiculous amount of violence to the point where one of the missionaries beats a soldier to death with a rock. Like, if you're going from a Christian principles point of view, it did not do much for that side of the issue.
It would have been better if he killed that guy with the Bible.
That would have been a little more interesting. But I thought it was pretty ironic that that's one of the kind of, they really did push that in the first act, but then as the movie progressed, all the religious principles got thrown out the window.
Well, there's even that part in Act 1 where I think it's Julie Benz character. No, it's whoever the guy is. I don't know if it's supposed to be her husband or just her
I think
friend.
it's just a friend.
Sort of unclear there. Whoever the leader is, he makes that sort of speech about how like violence is never the answer and this is the problem with the world, and then they happily accept just the bloodbath that ensues as a result of their behavior.
Yeah, totally.
But one thing I did like was when the boat comes up on them when they're going down river and they're all hiding. I felt it was a good bit of tension. Like, oh no, what's gonna happen? Are they gonna see him? And then they see the girl, and it's like, and they're trying to pull the girl out of there. And then Rambo like offs those three guys in like 3 seconds, and you know, I thought it was pretty cool.
It's like 5 guys. He does like some impossible draw shot.
Totally.
Yeah, it's amazing. That I love that scene too. That's actually, and this is again what we were talking about. That kind of tension building up to Rambo's release of savage violence was great in that scene and with the bow scenes, but it doesn't carry on in the rest of the film. You know, you could have had less explosions and more tension. I think it would have been better.
True.
Also in the bad, like, I know I said this in Rambo 2, but also again with this one, in the first movie, John Rambo is very careful not to kill anybody. He's very strategic, and he's not a bad person. And you know, in Rambo 2 in Vietnam and in Rambo 4 in Burma, he just doesn't seem to have like a lot of regard for life. And that kind of skews a little racist, you know. It's like white cops, not going to kill those guys.
Right.
Asian people, they're gone. And that's, I don't know, it kind of feels gross to me a little bit.
Yeah, but that's commentary on the series as a whole, where the first movie is a completely different movie than the rest of the movies.
Absolutely. See our previous video about how much I like the first one compared to the rest.
All right, let's get into the skinny. Let's give grades for Rambo.
B-. It's a Rambo movie. Like it's like just accepting that it is an action movie. It is Stallone. It's Rambo, that character that we've grown up with. It was good. It was action. Shit got blown up. There's nothing special about it, but it was entertaining.
I give it 2 out of 5 red headbands tied in slow motion with a sweaty brow. It's
only 2 out of 5.
Only 2 out of 5.
That's not a lot of headbands.
Yeah, man. And given that my metric is headbands, it's 2 out of 5 on the scale of Rambo movies. If we're scaling it with other films, it'll just come across rude.
Oh, so it's a
2 out of 5 red headbands for sure. It's got great action. It's got lots of blood. It's got that. If you like horror movies, you can imagine it as more of a horror movie than as a high-minded approach to solving the problems of Burma, which seemed to be what they were trying to do when they made the film. Does not succeed.
I give the movie a B-. I do enjoy the movie. I think it's a great looking movie. I like the character of John Rambo. I find him to be just kind of like a simple man, but like he really considers his actions, and I kind of appreciate that about him. And I thought, the action is done well enough. It looks great. All the acting in it, I thought was really great. Everyone's totally believable all the time. But where it falls apart for me is the plot is too simple. There's no real twist to it, and it's just right straightforward. And the action, like I said, is just doesn't really do a lot for me with just too many guns and not enough hand to hand or not enough bow and arrow. So that's going to do it for another episode of Inside Movies. Check out our other reviews on the Rambo series. See you next time, guys. Peace.
Thanks for having us, George.